So, cardiovascular system. Cardiovascular system is kind of three parts. You've got the blood, you've got the heart, and you've got the vasculature, which is going to be your arteries, your veins, your capillaries. I'm kind of breaking it down based on those three things, but it's probably going to be multiple parts for the heart and the vasculature because there's a lot to go through. So we're going to start off talking about the blood. Okay. So the blood, which you hopefully will remember from AP1, is a type of connective tissue. It's got the only fluid matrix where the cells of the tissue are actually floating in a fluid. So let's go on ahead and start going through that together. So this is a slide of the blood. You'll notice that there are pink cells that have no nucleus. These are going to be the red blood cells. Red blood cells have a naturally occurring stain in them, hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is the molecule that we have inside of our red blood cells that actually holds on to oxygen so that we can transport it around in the body. So these dudes right here are the red blood cells, okay? And no, you can't use abbreviations. The purple guys, these are actually white blood cells, okay? White blood cells can also be called leukocytes, and red blood cells can actually be called erythrocytes. Erythro means red, leuko means white. So the thing with the white blood cells, and yes, they all look very different because we have 5 different types of them, okay? They do not have a naturally occurring pigment within them. So when we take blood cells out, we actually do have to stain them so that we can see the white blood cells. That's why they appear purple. And you can see this little dude right here and this clump of dude over here, which is terrible, sorry. Okay, these are actually platelets. Platelets are going to be responsible for clotting our blood. And then if I were to point to anywhere where there is nothing, like these 2 places here, this would be the plasma. That would be the matrix that our cells are actually sitting within. Okay, so we've got several different types of white blood cells. We've got the red blood cells, we've got the plasma, we've got the platelets. Okay, I'm going to pause while I erase the board so that you don't have to watch me do that. So that you know, this beautiful figure that we've got here came from your book. This figure is one that I actually took with a microscope. Pink cells. Pink cells are going to be the red blood cells or the erythrocytes, okay? The purple cells, those are going to be the white blood cells. These little chunks of cell, you can see here, 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 and here, okay? Just little pieces of cell. These are the platelets. And then the stuff that this is floating in would be the plasma. Same as before. Now, let's get a little bit more specific about our white blood cells. We have 2 major categories of white blood cells, okay? We've got granulocytes, okay? And we actually have another category called agranulocytes. So you know that cytes means cells. Granulo literally is grainy. These cells, when you stain them, end up looking like they are filled with a grainy material. Agranulocytes don't. They look smoother, lack of a better way to put it. So we're going to go through the cells. We're going to talk about their differences visually. And then we're going to probably go back to those first slides so that we can distinguish the cells that you're already seeing. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. So starting with the granulocytes, okay? Granules within the cells, right? The neutrophil. Neutrophil, again, picture from your book, picture that I actually took with a microscope. Neutrophils have this kind of sausage link nucleus. And the more links you have, normally the older the cell is. Neutrophils are the most numerous type of white blood cell we have. They actually make 60 to 70% of the white blood cells population in your body. They don't live for very long. They only live for about 10 to 12 hours. So it's not a whole heck of a lot of time, but they are actually kind of the ones that monitor the most and do the most when there is an infection. So when do you see these in high numbers? If you do a CBC, a complete blood cell count, and you see high numbers of these, it usually indicates that somebody has an acute bacterial infection. Acute means a short-lived bacterial infection. So short-lived. Or it means that you got appendicitis. Okay? So if somebody somebody's sick and they're not sure what's causing that illness, and they decide, okay, we're going to do a complete blood cell count. What they're actually looking for is to see which population of white blood cells are higher. When the neutrophils are the highest number, it means that it's a bacterial infection and you need to take antibiotics. Remember that viruses, antibiotics don't do anything. Literally nothing, because that's not what they are designed for. But with a bacterial infection, if you can find the right antibiotic, you should actually be able to prescribe the right antibiotic so that a person won't get sick. Okay. So, neutrophils, going back to the original pictures. See the sausage links? 1, 2, 3, neutrophil. Sausage links, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, neutrophils. Okay? Now, the second granulocyte we're going to talk about are the eosinophils. Eosinophils kind of look like they're wearing shades. Okay? You've got this bilobe nucleus. Okay, and you've got a lot of these granules. Again, with the eosinophil, it is really, really obvious that it's got those granules in there. You can't miss it because it looks almost like a purple salt inside of the cell. They don't make up a huge portion of the white blood cell population, usually only about 2 to 4%. But where do you see them in high numbers? Usually you'll see these in high numbers in allergic reaction or in a parasitic infection. In other words, a worm infection. So if you've got hookworm or you've got tapeworm or you've got pinworm, you'll see these in high numbers because they can actually attack those. There was a case study a long time ago I learned about in grad school where there was a woman and she went in and they thought she had a brain tumor. And for the longest time, she was told she had a brain tumor. And they finally did an extra kind of set of scans. And they noticed that the tumor was moving, which made absolutely no sense. Well, it wasn't actually a tumor. It was a tapeworm. Tapeworm had made its way into her brain. And the way that it worked, the way that they kind of confirmed it, believe it or not, was they did a complete blood cell count. And they saw that the eosinophil number was huge, way more than that 2 to 4%. And it kind of confirmed, okay, there's a parasitic infection going on. And since the tumor moved, that made sense. Okay, next one, the basophil. So the basophil has such a dense collection of granules inside of it that stain, that pretty much it stains the entire cell. It only makes about 0.5 to 1% of the white blood cells population. It contains heparin. Heparin causes your blood vessels to dilate. Basically, it causes them to relax. And it's also an anticoagulant, meaning that it prevents blood clotting. That should be get to the site of infection, not GER. So it allows more white blood cells to get to the site of the infection. So basically, wherever there is damage on your body, this prevents a clot from immediately forming, and it opens up the blood vessels. That means that the blood can get out and get to the site of infection a lot faster. If you were to actually clot everything off right away, nothing would be able to get through to get to where the infection is. So there kind of has to be a balance there. Now, high numbers. You would see this in an allergic reaction as well, or radiation exposure. So let's say you've got radiation exposure and you've got a high number of these, but when they do a complete blood cell count, they don't see a high number of neutrophils. Because remember, allergic reaction also causes neutrophils to go up in number, right? Okay, if that's the case, we know that it's radiation exposure because these only increase in number when there's radiation exposure. If there's both an increase in number in neutrophils and with basophils, then that probably means an allergic reaction. All right, so those are the granulocytes. Let's go back. Oh, and by the way, because they have so many granules and they all stain so darkly, it pretty much just looks like an entirely purple cell. Believe it or not, this cell actually has that same bilobed kind of barbell looking nucleus as the eosinophils. But you don't see it because all of those granules have stained so darkly that it's impossible to see. So going back, actually, that wouldn't be a basophil. I'll explain why in a minute. And neither would any of those. Neither would those. Okay. So let's talk agranulocytes. We have two of these. Okay, 2A granulocytes. And if you look at the cells, that kind of whole concentration of the speckly looking granules, they're not really there with these cells. Okay, this specific cell is called a monocyte. Monocytes are actually pretty big compared to the other two, or other three, I should say. They make up about 3 to 8% of your white blood cell population, and they get activated by what we call T cells. T cells are part of our specific immunity. Specific immunity actually recognizes a target, goes after that specific target, doesn't go after anybody else, just that one target. So having that part of our immune response activate these cells is kind of important. So, thing about monocytes is they actually are 2 cell populations in our body. If there is no infection and they're just floating around, kind of looking around, they're monocytes. But once they get activated, they become macrophages. Macro, big. I just stepped on my own shoe. Thank you very much. Phago, eat. So during infection, these are the guys that actually do quite a bit of the cleanup. They go in, they eat things, whether that's debris or dead cell parts or bacteria. But in order for that to actually happen, they actually have to be activated. Before they're activated, they're a monocyte. After they're activated, they're a macrophage. So when do we find these in high numbers? We find them in very, very high numbers in chronic infections. So we talked about acute infections, right? Acute infections are going to be the short infections that don't last for very long. Chronic infections are the ones that last for a really long time. Things like tuberculosis. Tuberculosis lasts for, months and months and months. And that's if you get it treated. If you don't get it treated, eventually it's a year, 2 years, 3 years, and it kills you. So chronic means it's a long-lived infection. It takes a long time. Now, the other agranulocyte that we have, let me erase this. The other agranulocyte that we have is going to be the lymphocyte. Lymphocytes make about a quarter of our white blood cell population, okay? You see them in high numbers during viral infections, during antigen-antibody reactions or antibody-antigen reactions, and infections of mononucleosis. We actually do have two types of these. We've got B cells. B cells are the antibody factories. They're the ones that during an infection mass produce antibodies, 2,000 per second, believe it or not. And then we've got the T cells. The T cells, we actually have two separate populations. We have the helper T cells that actually help in activating both the B cells and these T cells. And we have the cytotoxic T cells. Cyto means cell. Toxic, I think poison. Cytotoxic T cells kill cells. That is their job. When we talk about the assassin cells, we talk about the ones that go after specific targets. That's that cell. That cell literally knows exactly who he's going after, and he goes after that one target and kills the one target. The thing that's scary about that, the thing that kind of can keep you up at night if you're not careful, is that if for some reason there's a malfunction in the way that your cells are working, this is a cell that can actually attack your own body. If you've ever heard of an autoimmune disease, that's when that cell, that cytotoxic T cell, starts attacking your own cells, which doesn't make any sense and shouldn't be possible. But unfortunately, just like with everything else in the world, there's always the chance for malfunction. So how do we tell this cell apart from the other cells? If you look, there's a big, huge nucleus in the middle, right? But you can see a halo of cytoplasm around it. I'm going to pull this up a little. Yeah, that was a book, sorry. Okay. Big nucleus, halo of cytoplasm. Big nucleus, halo of cytoplasm. Now, it just occurred to me that I didn't do that for the monocytes, so let me go back. Monocytes, at least to me, look almost like their cytoplasm is made out of root beer foam. It's very kind of bubbly looking. Their nucleus always looks horseshoe shaped or U-shaped. Even over here, see the kind of horseshoe or kidney bean shape? Monocytes always have that kind of shape to them, okay? So that's another thing that you'll see. Wait a minute, there. If you look here, there's a nucleus, there's a halo of cytoplasm around it. This would be a lymphocyte because you've got the big nucleus, a little bit of cytoplasm around that. Going back, big nucleus, little bit of cytoplasm around it. Lymphocyte. Horseshoe-shaped nucleus, U-shaped nucleus, kidney bean-shaped nucleus. That would be a monocyte, okay? If you learn the shapes, you should be able to learn which cell is which on a slide. Okay. Now let's get to our model. Okay. Here's our model. Okay. Hang on a second. Okay, so here's our model, right? Hang on, let me get the overhead lights because this looks terrible. All right, so here's our model. Red blood cells, really simple. They look like concave donuts that are red. Ta-da, red blood cells. Our platelets. Remember that platelets are not whole cells. They're kind of chunks of cell. So these little things that look kind of like sticker burrs, those are going to be the platelets. Okay? It's really hard to see from behind it. I'm not tall enough to do this. That's really sad. Okay. Now, our eosinophils. Our eosinophils have that bilobe nucleus, so 2 lobes. So if you look, wrong side, here, see how it's got 1 lobe here and 1 lobe here? Bilobe nucleus. 1 lobe here, 1 lobe here, bilobe nucleus, okay? Our neutrophils always have that kind of sausage link nucleus, right? So sausage link, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 1, 2, 3, up here, 1, 2, 3. You've got that kind of, again, sausage link nucleus. It's multiple parts. Okay, so basophil. On this, they didn't make the basophil just one big, huge, black-looking cell. Instead, there it is. Instead, like I said, there is a bilobe nucleus, but if you look, all of these little granules are stained, right? And they're stained that dark kind of purpley blue color. Well, on your screen, it's purpley blue. Maybe closer. Okay, blue. Okay. Now, these little guys right here. These little guys right here are going to be lymphocytes. These are the ones that have the big nucleus with a little halo of cytoplasm around it. Okay? Big nucleus, halo of cytoplasm around it. Now, do you see a kidney bean or a horseshoe-shaped nucleus? Nope, wrong side. This one, this one. This is going to be, or these are going to be, your monocytes. Okay? Horseshoe or kidney bean shaped nucleus. Now you're probably going, there's another cell in there, and it kind of looks different than everybody else. This guy right here. Remember I told you that there were 2 types of lymphocytes and one of them was an antibody factory? That's actually that cell right there. Now, B cells that become antibody factories are actually called plasma cells. That's actually what we call them. Now, all of this yellow that you see around these cells, all of this, okay, that would be the plasma, okay? So, let me go turn the light off so I can show you the picture. So this is the picture of the model that I've just shown you. The labels are kind of off of the cells here, okay? Eosinophil, platelet, but if you get confused, there's a second picture. And in the second picture, you're actually more on top of what I'm pointing out, okay? So that is cardiovascular system, the blood. If you have any questions, if you need any help, text me. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Oh, and yes, can use the model, can use the histology slides. So you need to be able to identify both.